I think a story of our time is a story, a piece of media, a book that captures a very specific moment, a very specific like cultural time in the world we live in, like what fascinates us, what's going on in the world around us too. But the way it becomes more is when the images and themes and ideas are more universal, or things that can stand up and people even years from now can connect with.
Hello and welcome to Tales of Our Time. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others should find meaning in them as well. We tackle movies, books, comics, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to listen. Or in today's story, actually, that will be play. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens. Now, before we get started, this is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind. Today I'm joined by my friend, Jared Friesen. Hey, Jared.
Hey, Amanda. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Is there anything you want to say to introduce yourself?
I've just been kind of like a lifelong comic books and video game fan, and I think there's some really interesting stories to find there too. I've been in Taiwan for 3 years, and just like it's just neat to see like those stories kind of connect over here too.
Okay, and I kind of gave away the game a little bit. I'm sorry about that. But what story have you brought for us to talk about today?
I have brought the 2018 Spiderman exclusive for the PS4, the PlayStation 4, for those of you guys who aren't gaming nerds too.
Now, usually when we do a book, I ask someone to like list the author, but for this one, I guess, do you know the studio that produced it?
Insomniac Games,
Okay.
who have done, I think, Ratchet and Clank.
That's a pretty
I'm forgetting the other one there, too.
famous, like, you know, not famous, but I mean, like, that's a pretty good standby for a lot of longtime gaming fans. Were they like the original Ratchet and Clank studio?
I think so too.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if they like changed studios between. That's okay. So for those of us like me, I actually haven't played this game yet. So do you think you could give us a short summary of it for people who are not as familiar with the story before we kind of move forward and talk about it a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. I think the way I pitch it to people is I think this is the best Spider-Man movie. First off, they skip right past the high schooler who gets bitten by a radioactive spider and his uncle dies.
Yeah.
We're past that. He has been Spider-Man for 5 or 8 years now, I think. He's 23. Basically, Peter Parker is in a good spot. He's graduated college, split with Mary Jane Watson, but she's a reporter for the Daily Bugle. He's a research assistant with Otto Octavius, working on like prosthetics and like cybernetic prosthetics to help people with disabilities or like amputations.
Noble.
And yeah, very noble too. And his Aunt May is working at the community shelter called Feast for a man like Alan Lee. So Peter's got a lot of like good role models in his life. He's making it like he lives on his own in Queens. Like things are pretty good. Working relationship with the NYPD.
Okay.
Yeah, and they start it too, he helps the police take down Kingpin, like one of the big crime bosses in the city.
Is that at the start or
That's
at the end?
That is the opening set piece of the game.
So you get to feel pretty big at the start of the game.
Yeah, you take down Kingpin. It's like a giant shootout at this like thing. It's very comic book, this game, but played very seriously. Like, this is just the world we live in, where one man controls the underworld of crime, and a plucky kid from Queens or a plucky 23-year-old from Queens can stop him. There's no like growing pains really. He's been doing this. He's pretty good at what he does. It's more just a story of like kind of people making choices in response to how they've been hurt.
So if you could summarize how the rest of the game goes.
Peter learns that Norman Osborn, his best friend's dad and mayor of New York City, shut down Dr. Octavius's research facility too. And Dr. Octavius, in order to get funding, has turned to crime too, because he's pushing this because Dr. Octavius has a degenerative disease that's actually taking away his motor skills. Cutting through that too, he assembles a classic team of villains from the Raft.
Dr.
Octavius, called the Sinister Six, so like a big callback for fans.
What is the Raft?
The Raft is a super prison for supervillains.
You would need a super prison for supervillains. Yeah.
They break out. Peter also finds out that one of the Alan Lee, the man who runs Feast, is also a test subject for this chemical weapon that Octavius wants to unleash on the city. This weapon gets unleashed actually and infects people. So the third act is desperate. Peter's racing his time to stop someone who is essentially a father figure to him but decided to just like hurt other people in revenge.
And that's Dr. Octavius.
Yeah. And a man who like mentored like what good selfless science could be like for Peter, but like fell away from that personally. And then at the very end, Aunt May gets infected too. And at the very end of this story, you find out she's known all along, because the very final scene of the movie is Peter has enough of the antidote to either save Aunt May or give it to the scientists to synthesize a cure that can be widespread to everyone else. And so Aunt May asks him to take off his mask because she wants to see her nephew.
Wow.
And she says, you know what the right thing is. It is a very good Spider-Man story.
Oh my God, I'm such a sap. I'm sitting here about to cry. That's as a writer, I have a vicious like joy at that, because that's very good. As a consumer, I'm really about to cry. Like that's a horrid twist at the very end.
I know, like,
and he does that. I guess he gives it to the scientist because he's a superhero. Superheroes have to do what's right, and especially Spider-Man. Oh God,
it's really tough. But like, I say this is the best Spider-Man movie too, because in a lot of movies, like I love the Tom Holland ones from Marvel, like the Tobey Maguire ones were like my first brush with it. Like Spider-Man is like my first superhero.
Oh, well, actually, I wanted to touch upon that a little bit because I wanted to ask you, what was your first experience with this story? So Spider-Man was your first superhero. I assume that means like the one that touched you the most, or the one that you related to the most, or was it literally the first one that you saw?
I think it was like the first one that like I really connected with too, because like obviously like every American kid's probably seen like Batman or Superman or even just the logo at one point. But Spider-Man was the one. I was a little kid in the elementary school library, and they had like this compilation from the 70s of like first issues released by Marvel. And it was like all the origin stories, and like Spider-Man's was in there too. So like, yeah, I saw a kid who looked like me, which is, if you talk to anybody like who goes and like waxes poetic about comics, is exactly what they wanted to pitch Spider-Man as. He was the teenager who was got the powers.
He's kind of supposed to be the everyman. I'm not really knowledgeable in terms of like Marvel or DC comics, but I know that Spider-Man is like the out of everybody else there, he's kind of like the everyman. Is that true? I
think so. Yeah, he's definitely like a street level superhero. Like he's the guy who'll pay the hot dog stand vendor as he swings through the city to snag a dog. And it's very set in New York City. Like he's the hometown guy.
It keeps him pretty relatable compared to like a lot of other superheroes, I feel like.
Yeah, and like I played the game. I was 23 in 2018. He's just stayed relatable to me too.
Like, all this time.
Yeah, like just he's a research assistant trying to make it happen out of college, doing something he thinks is worthwhile, but maybe doesn't pay enough. He's trying to work things out with a girl he really likes and who's really smart. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's okay too, because we're adults now.
That was your first experience with this game. Let's dial into that just like real quick. What was your first experience with this game? Like, how did you feel? Where was that? Where were you?
I had just recently moved out on my own to living in my old college town, kind of making it happen. My Christmas present to myself was a PS4. And I was like, oh, I'll get a couple games here and there. And I picked up the Spider-Man game because like I was Spider-Man, and I'd kind of heard some buzz around this too. And you get it. I got playing it, and it was just a really compelling story to keep playing through, and the game is fantastic too.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking up until this point. We haven't really even gotten to kind of like digging into it, but it just sounds like there's a lot to talk about that happens. And I guess I wonder if that's in some way because it is a game, so it's meant to engage you the entire way.
Yeah, I felt bad when you said no spoilers, because especially like...
No, I said the opposite of that. I said this is absolutely a spoiler. This is not a spoiler-free show.
Sorry, I meant, if you're a person here and you don't want spoilers, and you really don't want spoilers for 10, 12, 15, or 20 hours of like playtime in this really game world too.
The ship has sailed on this one after you told us how that one ended. That's a real big bummer. Well, then let's go a little bit farther than that. So what struck you about this story? Like, what made this game and the story in this game so meaningful to you? Was it because you had just moved out, or was there something else?
I think it was that recent moving out thing too. You just kind of are ready to identify with this character, and the game and gameplay do such a good job, like visuals, story, voice acting, gameplay, of immersing you in being not just like Spider-Man, but like Peter Parker, this person trying to fix things and do the best he can. And it's just a very immersive game, though, too. In the same way people talk about, like, the Batman Arkham games. If that's a reference people get to, like, it was like being this character, but this is a much more human character, too.
So did you find his like struggles very empathizable?
I think so, too, yeah. Like, some of the more human ones, though, too. But then, like, just you empathize with, like, a person agonizing over increasingly difficult decisions with people you care about doing the wrong thing.
Which one of those do you remember that really did kind of like tug at your heartstrings? Because you say like he did have a lot of like difficult decisions to make, and you said that he had a lot of like more human struggles. So like what were some of those that really like stood out to you, or that made you like just pick this?
Well, going into the no spoilers, the absolute
spoiler.
the,
But we're already past that.
The voice acting and lines during the final Dr. Octopus fight, because it's Peter confronting a mentor, a role model, and even like just kind of in some ways a father figure too. And like the voice actor in this is so good at like really conveying the heartache of like watching someone make it like consistently worse choices that hurt more people, and on your principles that maybe even you got from this person, having to stand in their way and stop them too. And like you can hear his heartbreak about like, and like anger too, of like, I trusted you, I looked up to you, but I still have to stop you.
Man, right? God, that sounds very wrenching. You're making me want to play this game.
It's a very good game.
Even though I know it's going to happen at the end, like now I kind of want to like give it a shot. So, okay, then if we could give an award for like a tale of our time, why do you think that this story deserves recognition for that? Or to like reword that, like why do you think that other people would find value in this story?
I think this is a good one because I've thought a lot recently about like the inundation of like superhero media in our current moment is very much like we watch action figures kind of clack together, maybe on the screen too. Or
what do you mean by that?
Like it's all building to the moment where we had this big kind of like low stakes PG-13 fight that's a very big spectacle for people to act out to. Or more of our Marvel movies are the superheroes interacting with each other and stuff too. Where in the Spider-Man game, maybe because they have more time, you also get to see you saving people, helping the city. Like it's so local, it's so personal, but like personal in saving people too, and choosing to do the right thing. That like, I think that's an important one if you're going to take young people or even old people and like take them through a superhero story, that like it have that message of like kind of like hopeful betterment, that we can be better, we can do better, and like we can choose the right thing, and it matters. Even
on a very personal level.
Even on a very personal level, or like even at a self-sacrificing level too.
Yeah, so definitely like not just saving New York from aliens or any like world-ending threats, but you know, for Ed down the block, like you're saving his life or his business, and that is like in essence saving his world.
Or like there's a moment in the game where Peter is chasing the main villains, but he has to stop an oil tanker from falling onto subway tracks too. And the villains in the getaway car are going to run him over with their car because he's pulling this up. But a police officer comes and drives his car and like basically like redirects the truck bearing down on Spider-Man. So it's got other people choosing to be heroes too.
Oh, I love that. Just it sounds like it's a very like warm feeling that you're left with in this game.
Yeah, and hopeful too.
Yeah. So then if you could give this story, Spider-Man, it's just called Spider-Man, I guess. By, who's the studio again?
Insomniac Games.
Okay, Spider-Man by Insomniac Games, a snappy, like one phrase subtitle, what would it be?
I don't know if it's like a subtitle or like advertising tagline, but I'd say like put on the mask.
Like you be the hero.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This has been Tales of Our Time with Jared Friesen, where we talk about movies that move us, what makes them important, and why other people should find them meaningful too. Thanks for joining me today, Jared.
Thanks for having me.
And we have been talking about Spider-Man by Insomniac Studio, Put on the Mask, a tale of our time. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.